There we go. So, well, Kasia, thank you very much for
Thank you for
joining me
having
today.
me, Matthew.
Yeah, it's great. It's
You're taking my podcast virginity.
there we go. There you go. Happy to do so. Happy to do
Thank
so.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's
I'm really excited.
nice. Yeah, it's the new form, new thing to do. So we might as well get ahead of the curve if not already. So
100%. And it's interesting because I was, I don't know, maybe about 2 years ago, I remember seeing a brokerage set up like a social media space. And I was like, oh my God, it would be so amazing if we had this at Remax West. And then, not long after,
yeah.
here we are.
Shout out to Jordan Mete. I know he's the main one responsible for the podcast room. So thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Yeah,
Very much so.
It's a good space.
No, it's it's a value add because I don't know. I'm sure other brokerages have it, but I don't know of any, and they certainly don't advertise it. So it's definitely a benefit of being a Remax West agent. So
100%. And I mean, if you think about how much money you have to spend to create content like this.
that's the thing. Well, yeah, to your point, I was thinking about doing a podcast, and I finally decided to do it. I think it was this year started. But yeah, the startup costs are enormous, right? Just people don't realize the camera equipment alone, gets into the thousands of dollars. So having it already set up for you, reduces a huge amount of that. So
Plug and play.
plug and play. There we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to know a little bit about you. Introduce yourself. So you're a real estate agent. You're an expert in real estate education. You're also a mom. So
That's right. So I started in real estate, went through the education process back in 2015.
okay.
So I got registered sometime at the beginning, I think it was of 2016. So I'm getting into my almost 10th year now in real estate. I got a 3-year-old boy, so
That's awesome. Congrats.
extremely busy between all of that.
I could imagine. So you went through the previous real estate education.
That's right. I did my my education with the Ontario Real Estate Association.
Oh,
when
okay,
they had
cool.
the courses at the time.
Yeah, cool. I think we'll talk about that as well. But so what made you get into real estate?
You know what? It's funny. I actually did not plan to get into real estate. So, when you're in high school and elementary school and you're kind of thinking about, well, what am I going to do with my life?
Right.
Real estate was nowhere on my radar. Nowhere on my radar. Was
Yeah.
it for you?
No, I was going to say, honestly, I don't think it is for a lot of people, to be honest.
And it used to be, not to generalize, but I think a lot of people would choose real estate as a sort of secondary career. So maybe whatever they were doing at the time wasn't quite working out for them. So real estate was, another option.
It's a good pivot. It's a good pivot career, yeah.
Absolutely. And, it's not hard to get into real estate. And I always say there's really no income ceiling in this business.
Yes.
Right?
So I've heard that, and it's true. However, there's also no floor.
Absolutely.
That's what I didn't realize, and I think a lot of people don't realize there's no ceiling. To your point, the opportunities are endless, literally, but there is no floor. So if there is no certain baseline. With a lot of sales jobs outside of real estate, you have a base salary, and then any additional sales you get commission. But here, it's not the case.
Absolutely. So, I think something that we were talking about before we even got into our podcast was, I think a lot of people think that this business is a lot easier than it actually is.
Sure.
Right? With the rise of reality shows and everybody's on every agent is on social media with the sold signs. So I think it gives a little bit of a misconception as to how much work is actually involved.
Yes.
How much did you make in your first year of real estate?
Not much, maybe a couple thousand. I was doing mainly leases. Leases are still a really big part of what I do, but in the beginning, honestly, I think that's something that they don't teach us in real estate education enough is how is one getting the clientele. I think they usually start us, well, you did, or I don't know if it was similar, but I did it through Humber, and it always started from the point of, okay, you have this client, they want to buy this, they want to sell this, they want to lease this, blah, blah, blah. But we never had the conversation, how did you get that client?
Right.
How many appointments did you have to go to? How many leads did you have to go through? What is marketing? What is advertising yourself? What are some scripts you need to use? XYZ.
Absolutely. And that is a gap. I would think that it's a gap that really the brokerage should be filling as well.
Sure.
Once you finish, all of your real estate education, the importance of picking your first brokerage, I think, is really up there, because you need to figure out now exactly that. How am I going to get my first client? And it's a really important step to take once you get registered into being a real estate agent, is coming up with a business plan.
Right.
Right? A lot of agents don't know you need to actually be treating this like a business. You need
That's
to
true.
have systems in place. You need to wake up on Monday morning and kind of know what you're doing.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Actually, I was going to ask you, how did you do on your first year?
Yeah, not very well. I did about $2,000 also in leasing. I did start out as a part-time agent though,
Okay.
so I'll openly admit that real estate was going to be my side hustle. Which
No shame in that.
For some people it works,
Yeah.
but I would argue though, if you really want to make this a real career for yourself, you've got to go into it with both feet.
I agree with that. To your point, I started off initially, getting the feet wet and stuff. It was a
Yes. Me too.
transitionary time for me. Doing it full time now, but I don't know about you, but I do other things. I like to wear a few different hats.
Yeah.
I never can see myself just doing one exact thing, but that's the beauty of real estate. You're very flexible. So, I consider myself full time because when the client calls, I'm there. I'm making myself available.
Yep.
Weekends, evenings, during the day, whatever. I will move around my schedule because we have the freedom to do so. One of the perks
Yeah.
of this business, and I will make the time. So that's what I really define as full time, because there are some full time realtors that you can't get a hold of after 5 o'clock. So then
That's the problem I have with it, right? Because I also am involved in other avenues, but it's still within the real estate industry. So when
Right.
I say that I started out part-time, I had a 9 to 5 job that I was working.
Okay.
So exactly to your point, I mean, you have a lot more flexibility in this business, certainly, than if you are in a 9 to 5 job, but you're also at the mercy of your clients. And I don't mean that to sound negative, but you have to be, like you said, available, not just for your clients, but I'm sure you've had situations where, you're trying to book an appointment on a listing, you can't get a hold of the agent. The
Ghost
brokerage,
agent.
yes, exactly. The brokerage isn't really doing much. And so it becomes a problem as well for you and your clients, because you can't provide the level of service that you want to. And how many times, I can't count how many times it's happened to me where I've gone to show a property. So we did have a confirmed appointment. And then, the tenant is at the door and they're like, well, I wasn't notified that there was a showing here, so I'm not letting you in. Or the seller's standing with you in the driveway and they're telling you, like, hey, we already accepted an offer. What are you doing
Oh,
here?
it's my favorite. My favorite.
I lose my mind.
Well, that's a big thing. On communication
Yep.
is not there most of the time, and that's when we go on listing appointments. I actually make the point of asking. I usually try not to talk about myself on this movie. I try to talk, ask the client about
Sure.
what they want from us, and sometimes we're dealing with a previous experience, that the negative experience with the realtor, and usually the number one reason why was lack of communication. Or even if they don't say it, they'll describe the situation and it was like, okay, that was a communication issue. It happens on the client end, happens on the back end with other fellow realtors, even sometimes the brokerage you're dealing
Absolutely.
with. Yeah, communication is key.
It's a big part of this business. I agree, and it looks bad on you, certainly when you're dealing with agents that are not communicating, like
Yes.
you said, to the degree that they should be. And it just makes the industry look bad in
I agree.
general,
I
right?
agree.
Where we get into these conversations now with clients where they maybe don't see the value of a real estate agent. I'm sure you've dealt with for sale by owner properties as well, where people are like, nope, I can do this myself. I don't need a real estate agent.
Well, exactly to your point. And when I listen to the conversation, to the story of what they're telling me, I'm honestly, most of the time, I'm like, well, yeah, I agree. And
Yeah.
with that experience, yes, why would you need an agent? Like they're telling me stories of how they were just there to sign the paperwork and then they never saw that agent again.
Yep.
So sure, well, I would come to the same conclusion as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, under the current legislation, sellers have that option, or, well, buyers, anybody really that's transacting in real estate. You can self-represent yourself, or you can work with a brokerage. But for me personally, I haven't seen necessarily an increase in people self-representing themselves.
I haven't either. I think I did one deal in that respect.
I haven't even done one.
Yeah.
I haven't even done one. But I can see I think it is a great thing to have that option.
Oh, absolutely. There are, there are a lot of, I think who would it be good for? It would be good for someone that's experienced, maybe a past realtor,
Sure.
that transitioned out of the business, or, someone that buys and sells real estate heavily, an investor,
Yep.
And they know what they're doing. They have the time, maybe a lawyer, that, could do the deal anyways. But
Absolutely.
I think it doesn't apply to, maybe, 80% of the population. So
I agree, and I'm sure there's a statistic out there somewhere that most for sale by owner properties end up selling with a real estate agent anyway, or there's some sort of involvement from a real estate agent.
You know what's funny? It's not usually that they're not willing to pay the commission, and that's what I've established, because you'll see in the brokerage remarks, like, because there are brokerages that will just list, they'll do like mere postings,
Yes.
or mere listings, and sometimes it's a monthly fee or flat rate, depends what brokerage it is. But in the brokerage remarks, almost always it says 2.5% out, sometimes 3, sometimes 2, or sometimes it says 0, but then in the remarks says, a seller is willing to negotiate.
Yep.
Then I'll call them, and they're like, yeah, we're willing to pay. And I'm like, okay, well then what's up with the
What's the
agent?
issue?
Yeah, what's the issue? And, then you get into this whole, rabbit hole.
It's usually an experience,
Yes.
something that brought them to this. I don't like real estate agents and I don't want to work with them.
Yeah. Sometimes they are a little, I'll be honest, sometimes they are a little delusional about their price point. They think they can do it themselves, which some people can, some people can't, because I'm calling that number. I'll call for sale by owners, and you know how many numbers are not in service that they provide?
Yep.
Just that alone, and then they don't answer, they don't call you back, and they don't know why I'm calling. So for all they know, I could be a buyer.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That's usually what drives most for sale by owners to end up working with an agent, is just they don't want to deal with all of the calls,
Sure. Yeah.
all of the appointments, right? If you're working your usual 9 to 5 job and you're listing your home for sale, I mean, I don't imagine too many people are going to be available to show that property. But even you get home from work, you don't want to be bothered with random strangers walking through your property, right?
100%. And then you're the only point of contact. So there's, all the questions are coming to you.
Right.
All the work. It's true.
And like some of the questions that we get when we have listings are
Unique.
they're unique.
Yeah.
Good word to use. Yes, exactly.
Well, it's true, because almost everyone can buy a property, almost everyone can sell a property, so you literally get a wide spectrum of people.
Yep.
So, and that's okay. That's one of the good parts of this business. Actually, it's very diverse. So,
Yep.
We like that sometimes. So you mentioned you're a mom. So how do you find? Is it challenging being a realtor mom? Work-life balance.
You know what? You go through different phases, right? Like when my son was born, and I was going through the newborn phase of my son. Just when they're a newborn, they're pretty much like a little crying potato on a mattress.
Yeah.
And I remember going through that, and I took a longer maternity leave because I had the option, and my husband was also traveling for work at the time. So I spent a lot of days where I was just alone with my son. And as beautiful as that time is, it's obviously a very, very hard job.
Of course.
And I remember I couldn't wait to get back to working full time. I couldn't wait. And now my son has grown up a little bit. He's about 3.5, so he's talking, he's got ideas, he's interesting to be around. And there's certainly days where I'm like, I just want to be a stay-at-home mom.
I could imagine.
So you go through these phases, and it can be really challenging sometimes, especially because I would argue that in this business, again, there's more flexibility than if you were in a 9 to 5
100%.
position. So I remember when I got started into real estate, and my mentor at the time, she said, we were talking about the whys, why do you like real estate so much? Why do you like this business? And she said, I was able to, when my son was little, pick him up from school every day. And at the time I was, in my mid-20s, so even thinking about being a mom, it wasn't anywhere on my radar. But I remember that really stuck with me. And I'm able to pick my son up from school. Not always every day. Sometimes I got to defer the responsibility to my husband. But ultimately having that ability is pretty wonderful. It's pretty wonderful. My son's also now, again, because he's so cognizant and he's so chatty, I'm sharing things with him about real estate, and just the way that he absorbs the information is
Starting him young, eh?
Yeah, it's quite interesting to see.
That's good. Can be mom's assistant too in a few years.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's been a few times where I've taken him out. If I'm doing like a listing prep, or I deal with a lot of first-time home buyers. I deal with a lot of parents as well. So often my clients' kids get to know my son as well, and
That's awesome.
You develop a really close relationship with your clients. So
You do.
it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing.
It's awesome. Yeah, you add an extra cuteness factor there. That's a good way of getting extra
Definitely.
business. I see. I gotta get me one of these kids.
Are you thinking about having a family one day?
I'd like to eventually. Yes. It's just trying to find the right time, right person. So.
I think it's a little bit harder now. You hear about people having less kids, or they're
Yes.
waiting longer to have children just because I think we're still in an affordability crisis here in Canada.
Oh, definitely.
Right? We've had mortgage rates come down a little bit. We've even seen the prices ease up a bit, but it's still, it's a challenge. It's a much bigger challenge to establish that family than when our parents did it.
Oh, for sure. It's mind-boggling the amount of money you need to raise even just one child.
Yeah.
And the affordability crisis is still a thing. Yes, interest rates have come down, but prices they've corrected a touch since that market craziness, but
It's still very high.
exactly, still very out of touch with someone's salary, let's say, right? So if I had this conversation with my dad. So, he was an immigrant from Italy, came here, Canada, and when he was 18, and he was a business owner always. So I think he was making, a little bit more money than someone who was working 9 to 5, but still, relative to the time. So he told me he was making, so I'll tell you first, he bought my parents' house in the 80s for like $150,000. Like there's like a 4-bedroom, 4-bath house, detached, corner lot in Woodbridge, like Vaughan. Good area. And I'm like, okay, great. So, and my mom wasn't working at the time, she was raising us kids, and I said, okay, so how much were you making a year? And he's like, around like 50,000. I'm like, fuck. Okay, so now some people are still making 50,000 a year, and that same house is 1.5
That's
million.
right. It is really crazy when you kind of think about it in actual numbers like that.
Yeah.
I have a lot of clients, again, my first time home buyers, where we're going through the pre-qualification process, and I have a lot of situations where mom and dad are helping the first-time home buyer.
Yes.
And in a lot of these cases, the money that mom and dad are giving to my buyers is the down payment is the same amount of money on a condo, mind you. Usually it's a condo or townhouse purchase in the onset, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same amount of money, that down payment, that mom and dad paid for the entire house.
Yeah.
Not even that long ago. I mean, well, you were talking about your dad in the 80s. My parents, when also immigrants, they bought their first house, I believe it was in the early 2000s. But before that, they were renting a 2-bedroom apartment. It was at the time about $1,100 a month. And same thing, my dad was working. My mom got to stay at home with the kids, and we lived a nice life.
Which is a nice thing to do. Like I know sometimes it's frowned upon in modern society, but it's actually nice having the mother of your children raising your family, if that's what they want to do.
Absolutely. Right? And I'm all for, I know a lot of moms that are working moms, and it's an incredible challenge to have to balance work life with mom life. And then, you factor into the daycare costs, right? When I first sent my son to daycare, he started when he was, just before he was a year old.
Okay.
So our starting rate was $2,000 a month for daycare.
Wow.
So it's gone down now because, we've got the federal program, and I don't really want to get into that because they haven't done the best job with that daycare program.
A government program not run efficiently? You don't say.
Who would think,
I
right?
don't believe you. I'm teasing.
No, but it's good because it brought down the daycare cost for a lot of families.
Hey, that's great.
But the problem is that now we have issues with space, right? Because you opened up an avenue for more families to be able to afford daycare, which is absolutely wonderful. But there's not enough spaces. There's not enough staff. The staff what I hear, because I've got a couple of friends and family members that work in childcare, the pay is not amazing.
Right.
So what is the incentive for anyone to get into that line of work, right?
That's a very good point. No, it's true. We need to, it's a fine line. We need to pay people more, but then the cost goes up, and then it becomes it's a hard problem to solve.
And these are some of the things that nobody unfortunately tells you when you're becoming a mom is what about childcare?
Right.
What happens in the summers when mom and dad are still at work,
Right.
but school is off.
It's off, yeah.
So
that's a good point.
There's programs and camps, but again, there's obviously
At an additional cost, yeah. Well, I know some people that have had children like yourself, and then the husband and wife sit down and they're like, okay, well, I make X amount, you make X amount, childcare is this amount.
Yep.
In some cases, it's the same, if not more than
for mom to go back to work, or for dad to go to work.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they make the decision, okay, you know what, instead of just working for nothing, one of us will stay home.
Absolutely. And that it gets even more difficult if you decide to have more than one child, because here I am talking about the struggles of having one kid. If I were to add another one into the equation, so let's say that your child is part of a daycare, because not all daycares are under that federal program.
Oh, okay.
So if you are at a daycare where the cost is still what it is, let's say $2,000 a month, and now you have a second child that you also have to enroll in daycare. Yeah, exactly. Usually mom and dad are going to sit down and say, okay, who makes more money, who should not give up their career.
Right.
And that's terrible. And,
yeah, it's sad, yeah.
You think back in the day, grandma and grandpa were very involved with my childhood, and I had an amazing childhood I had the best grandparent experience. They were back home. So when we came to Canada, I didn't have my grandparents, but my mom was taking care of us full time.
Nice.
But because of the way that times have changed, you also don't have that reliance on grandma and grandpa, right?
Well, now people are delaying when they're actually having kids, so the grandparents might actually not be around anymore, which is my case.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm actually jealous of my sister and brother, because they're much older than me, so their kids at least got to meet our grandparents, whereas mine, if I decide to have, will never. So.
Yeah, and that's so sad, right? But you think even some parents that might have grandma and grandpa around, grandma and grandpa are probably still working.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
The retirement age.
Issue, yeah.
My grandma retired actually to take care of me when she was around 50.
Oh, wow.
But most grandparents nowadays, if they're not working right till the end, at least until what's the current retirement age? I think something in the 70s, right?
Like when you can take...
you can retire and tap into your CPP.
I think it's 65 still, no?
65?
Yeah, 65,
okay, you might be right. You might be right.
But it's not much.
Nevertheless,
so,
right? You think about your quality of life at 65. I don't imagine somebody at 65 being able to look after a 3-year-old. Not to say anything against 65-year-olds. They're all in great shape.
Yeah.
But a 3-year-old has a lot of energy, and I know that I get exhausted with my son, so I can't imagine having elderly grandparents try to look after a crazy toddler.
No, I could imagine. It's definitely a hard problem to solve, and I don't know if it will get solved anytime soon, but at least they are making some headway in terms of the education and all that. So yeah, actually that's a good thing about education. I wanted to talk to you about that. You know a lot about real estate education. So you previously mentioned that you were under OREA, or you did your schooling under OREA, and from what I understand, it was kind of taken from them, and now it's under a few different organizations. Humber is one of them. So that's what I did. Do you know why it was transferred out of OREA? What was the...
I can't say exactly why. I just know when I did my education through OREA, there was, I would say, inconsistencies in the program. So I did all of my 3 courses with the option of doing it in class. I just find that I learn a lot better when I've got somebody there to help me process the
I'm the
information.
same way. Yeah.
Right? Whereas reading a textbook, I mean, you can make all the notes you want. It just doesn't stick for me. Anyway, so my first course wasn't a bad experience. Course 2, I think, was probably I think it was course 2 that I had a really bad experience, where the instructor came into class, opened up the textbook, and for 2 weeks would just read page after page out of the textbook. There was no engagement, there was no problem solving, right? So exactly what you were talking about when we started the podcast, it's not just questions about how do I get my first client. I mean, there's concepts in there that are difficult to understand. And so, yeah, I think there were just inconsistencies with the program. It wasn't
Run the best.
just, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Which is interesting to hear because it's OREA, the Ontario Real Estate Association, right? So they should have, an iron fist with these things, you'd imagine, right? They have I think they moved from that facility they had, right? I think they're not there anymore in
I
Toronto.
don't think
they
so,
moved
no.
somewhere.
But the courses were always held in various places, right?
Oh, it
Like,
wasn't. Oh, I thought it was held. Oh, okay.
It wasn't. I don't know if they. I don't remember now if they had like a standard college setting.
Okay.
But I know like my first course I did at York University. It was delivered there.
Hmm.
And then the second 2, if I'm not mistaken, were in like a Monte Carlo Inn in the conference room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
interesting.
even that alone, I mean, not having like a dedicated school space,
Yeah.
I think kind of made the experience maybe
No, I
not
think
the
you're
most
right.
pleasant.
Yeah.
It was nice because it was offered everywhere, right? So if you lived in Mississauga, you probably were able to find a course near you without having to travel out of the way. But Humber now delivers most of their programs virtually. So I think that's great as well because you can literally be outside the country and you can be doing your real estate education online, right? So I think the flexibility with that is awesome.
Yeah. Mine was. I think they have some in-person courses now too. But when I started, it was still during the COVID madness, so it was all online. Which
And you know what? You know what's interesting, actually? The program, I don't believe, was intended to be virtual. I mean, the e-learning part you'll be doing virtually regardless, but the courses were meant to be delivered in person, but it
interesting.
was COVID that actually brought it into the virtual setting.
Interesting. I know a lot of people prefer it. We mentioned before, both of us, I think we prefer the in-person aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I'm jealous to the new would-be realtors that they're in person, but that's okay. We still made it. But yeah, no, that's interesting. I enjoyed the courses. I think I learned a lot from it. I think my only recommendation or critique of it is that they just start or at least focus a little bit more on actually how we are getting the clients, the marketing, that type of thing. And you did mention rightly that the brokerage should be involved in that as well. However, I think I was misled in a way that it was like, okay, well, the clients are just going to come to you.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny that you say that because when I did my education, actually, I got registered. I joined a brokerage. I was officially a real estate agent. And then I just kind of waited. I was like, well, why is nobody calling me to sell their house, right? And I think that mentality has improved a little bit where people are not just sitting and waiting for people to call them. But I certainly agree with you that there should be more onus placed on, how do you actually get the business? Okay, we know how to fill out the forms, the documents, but what about that gap about how we actually get that first client?
Yes.
Right?
No, exactly.
So do you think that it would be good for it to be offered as, a sort of semester-based program there where it would be, you got to do 2 years to get your real estate registration and sales and things like that would all be encompassed?
You know what? I don't think it would be a bad thing. And I have to be careful because they give you 2 years. I actually finished in 6 months. So me saying this would be to my own detriment. Yeah, I was in a time pivot. I had no choice but to do it. It's like, okay, this is what I'm doing now, and we better get licensed ASAP. So, but yeah, you have the 2 years. I don't think they should force you to complete in 2 years, but there should be a set curriculum like it is now. And if you complete it let's be real. The fact that I completed in 6 months probably implies that there could be a little bit more curriculum added. With that being said, I think a little bit more education couldn't hurt.
Certainly. And even if there were maybe some optional courses, right?
Yeah,
Because
some electives, yeah.
some people, especially like, there might be people getting into this business that already have family members that have been actively trading, right?
Yeah.
So maybe some optional courses where learners can actually choose, okay, I've covered the compliance aspect of it. Now I want a little bit more in actual sales training,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I consider myself a little bit lucky because I came from a background of family business. I had my own business at one point. I had like a personal training business, and then this, like, coming into this was a little bit easier. I had some idea how to get things going. Okay, like I need a website, I need business cards, I need to do X, Y, Z. But the real estate specific stuff obviously was not there. But I think it should be added on, and I think it should be at least one course mandatory to talk about lead generation, marketing oneself, that type of thing. I don't think it could hurt.
No, I definitely don't disagree.
Yeah, and maybe we could talk about it now, because I mean, I was going to ask you, do you think we have too many realtors? Because I think that would help maybe slow down. It would slow down the number of realtors, but also increase the quality of realtors. Because I think a lot of the negative connotations that are associated with real estate are because of some of the bad actors. And I'm not saying it's the education system, but I think the more you learn, the more you learn, the more you'll are less likely to make mistakes. Yeah, be better, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are multi-million dollar. It's not like we're talking about selling a house for $5. These are millions of dollars,
That's right.
hundreds of thousands, right?
That's right. And it certainly grinds my gears when I hear agents talking about, just flipping as many transactions as they can. Like, they really look at the transaction as just let's get as many numbers done as possible. And that's certainly not the approach that I have to my business, because I deal with first-time home buyers, because I deal with so many families. There is that emotional process to it. So you can't just be looking at this transaction as a sort of, we always talk about real estate. Oh, it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. But there's people behind these numbers, right?
Absolutely.
Not everybody is an investor just trying to get the maximum value for their home or make the most amount of money in real estate investing. A lot of people, this is, I'm going to be moving into this house. I'm going to be raising my family. So should there be less real estate agents out there? I mean, I'm sure you've seen the statistics, right? There's a lot of agents in our industry that are not selling anything, or they're selling just one property for the entire year.
I think that's 70. I think 70% of. I don't know if that was the United States stat, but it's probably somewhere here. I think 70% of agents did not do a single transaction last year.
And I'd say even if that was a U.S. statistic, I'd say that's probably on par with our numbers as well.
I would guess so.
And I think that again ties into people thinking that this business is a lot easier than it is. I know that some people also get into this business because they want to save money on commission. So they assume, you know what, I'll just get my real estate registration and then I can buy and sell my homes myself.
I went to one of the guys in my Sims openly said that he wanted to sell his house and that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and then again, that comes back to, well, why do you want to do that? I had a bad experience with my real estate agent and I want to do this myself. And I again, it's up to the consumer. It's up to the person becoming a real estate agent. Ultimately, you can get into this business for whatever reason you see fit. However, obviously, someone like yourself or myself that's in the trenches of this every single day, and we see what's happening. Because right now, I would argue that the market is changing week to week.
Yes.
Right? We can look at the statistics on a monthly basis, but every week the activity is different. The way consumers are approaching the real estate market is different. So if you're not involved in this on a regular basis, it's very difficult to, quantify that data and to see what's actually going on.
No, it's true. I think you're right. I think the market is ever changing. There's a lot of external forces.
Yep.
We're in a crazy world of tariffs and exemptions to said
And
tariffs and market uncertainty.
Who would have predicted that for this
Right.
year?
No, exactly.
I know when we were all kind of looking at 2025 at the end of 2024, we were expecting the market to be in a very different place.
Yeah, we're expecting the spring market to be, what it usually is, an active time.
And even last year, when I was out in the spring market, I'd say And I haven't dived into the statistics of this, but I think our market last year was a little bit hotter than this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we're still gonna have to see what ends up happening with the spring and summer market, but we were seeing a pickup just before the tariff announcements, or at least I was, and then it kind of, we've had a couple clients back off saying, you know what, there's a little bit too much uncertainty right now. Even now, some banks, I don't know if you heard this, some banks were announcing that people with jobs in certain industries were not going to be qualified for a mortgage because of the uncertainty.
Absolutely.
So, you know, when you start hearing stuff like that, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, I'd be scared too.
It's terrifying, right? And that there's definitely a psychological aspect to trading in real estate, especially if you are, you know, making your first purchase.
Yes.
But we've seen mortgage rates going down. So it usually, in the past, it's been, okay, rates are starting to come down now. The excitement is coming back into the market. Then you see the prices starting to go up. And that hasn't been the case this year, because I certainly agree with you, right? If you're worried that you might not have a job at the end of this month or at the end of this year, you're going to be a little bit more cautious about where you put your money, or if you decide to finally take that step into real estate.
I agree. Well, the fact that the banks are not already coming out with what I just said, that already should be, you know, alluding to
a red flag.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of market stats, I have them in front of me. Might as well just throw them on the table. So I know we're in April, but I feel like people always say this because we're in April, but TREB goes back last month. So these are March stats, the most current that we have. So we're up new listings are at 17,263. We had just over 5,000 solds last month. The average listing price is $1,093,000, 2.5% less than March of 2024. So 1.12 versus 1.09. The average days on market is 36 days, which is not bad. It's hovering around, like, we used to be hovering around 40, 50. So I think it's starting to come a little bit down. For what I find interesting, though, is the number of sales are down 23%.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, but the new listings are up 28%.
And that's a little bit of a concerning statistic, right?
Yeah.
Because for years, I mean, especially even after the peak of the market back in, you know, February, March of 2021, we still had a hotter market, and there was always this argument that we don't have enough listings.
Yes.
And now we seem to have
a
surplus in some areas of listings. And you know, you can't blame buyers for sitting on the sidelines and wanting to wait and see what happens.
Even so, everything is down, like, because usually, well, you know, I'm sure you agree, detached is the creme de la creme of real estate. At least, you know, in theory it is. Condo market has always been suffering, but like these last two, February and March, even detached and semi-detached have been sliding. Like even detached wasn't safe this last month. Year over year, down 1.8%. Semis down 0.9%. Townhomes down 3.5%. Condos 2.6% down. So everything is sliding right now.
And you know, I think townhomes stand out the most to me because across most markets, townhouses and semi-detached as well, I would probably lump into that category, always hot. Because, you know, a townhouse is pretty affordable. So if you're not quite there, you can't really get into the semi-detached or detached market. A townhouse is always a great option to start a family. So
I agree.
To see that those statistics are down, yeah, definitely. I don't want to say worrisome, because real estate will always be cyclical. So we'll have, you know, downs in the market, but overall, I would still argue that real estate investing is a good and safe way to invest, but you got to be in it for the long term.
Yes, I agree. Because I just had a client buy a condo, and that was their same thing. You know, like, we don't want to overpay. I said, okay, well, listen, you know, we're going to negotiate the best price, but then, are you prepared for the long haul? Are you prepared to hold for 3 to 5 years minimum? Yes. Okay, then great. Then you should be fine. You know, we don't have a crystal ball, but historically, there's a chart I always see online. You know, I think it goes from, like, I don't know, like the 50s or 60s to now, and it's a steady increase. So
that's right.
You know, we have the ups and downs, but the net is always.
But the overall line goes like that. I always reference that as well. And I have clients that purchased last year, and you know, we've had some conversations about, well, the price has gone down. Should I have waited to buy this year? And, you can't time the market, especially right now. That just with the tariffs, even I would have never predicted a trade war as being, the highlight of 2025. But these are external factors that you just can't control. But yeah, I would make the same argument. Are you planning to sell this year? No, I'm not. I'm going to be here for another few years. So wouldn't you rather put the money towards your equity? And,
Exactly.
a lot of these clients, if they were previously in situations where they were renting, why pay down someone else's mortgage when you could be building your own equity?
I always say this now. The only real difference right now between a buyer and a renter is if you have a down payment or not. Because, we're sitting in Toronto here, a full home at minimum is like $3,500 a month. And it's for nothing special. You want to get into like a nice home, $4,000 a month easily. In Vaughan, same thing, $3,500, $4,000. Upper levels are $3,000. To your point, you're paying off someone else's.
And it's your home, right?
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want with it. If you get to a situation where, maybe things go wrong with your employment even, if you're in a situation where you can maybe move back in with mom and dad and put the condo up for rent for a year or two.
Hold if you can.
Yeah, absolutely hold.
Well, I think you would agree with this, but we subscribe to the idea of having a client for life. So that means that we're always trying to put the client first. If I'm advising you to sell, it's because I think it's the right time for you to sell. If I'm advising you to hold, then I think it's the right time. In theory, it doesn't benefit me to tell you to hold because we only make money unless a transaction is involved. But I don't want to do business that way. If it's not the right time, like me and Michelle, we had like 12 conversations last year with sellers, and it's like, honestly, we do not advise you to sell right now. To your point, hold, rent it out, or move. Sometimes they had a basement apartment, rent to the basement apartment. Like, do something to hold it because you're going to lose money.
Absolutely.
What's the point?
So you're almost in a sense shooting yourself in the foot because you're not going to have that transaction at that time. But I believe that giving honest and real advice, maybe that seller doesn't want to sell right now, but they're going to refer you to their friends because they're like, oh, Kasia, I trust her. She gave me honest and real advice that benefited me and not herself.
Oh, you will know this. So I think I know we're on the right track with that mentality because you were at the Frank Leo. We met at the Frank Leo meeting. Yeah. And that was one of the things he said. You need to be honest with the client. And if someone like Frank Leo is saying that, then I think we're on the right track.
Absolutely. And I've always highly regarded Frank Leo. I was actually introduced to him. I went to one of his seminars before I joined Remax West.
Cool.
He was saying something similar. This was, I think, the winter, early spring of 2023. And his whole thing was, listen, your main job this year is to support your clients.
Yeah.
Not to try to get a deal out of them, but to look at really what is the best option for your client.
No, I agree. If there's a deal to be had, then great. But if not, you need to have the moral, let's call it the moral fortitude.
A moral compass.
Yeah,
Just
the
a moral
fortitude.
compass.
Yeah, the moral, exactly. But then, sometimes it's hard because, not hard, but it's hard to tell someone no, because they might very well much want to sell, but they don't realize the repercussions of that. But it's not easy to have those difficult conversations.
Absolutely. And I would say, nobody wants to hear this, but sometimes you've got to let your clients fail as well, right?
Yes,
because
that's true.
We can only advise as much as we can. Ultimately, I can't tell somebody what to do. So sometimes your advice and the advice that you're giving goes against what your client wants, but ultimately it's their decision. Right. So
of course.
I definitely have a hard time with that sometimes. I think we all do. You see a client, just ready to pretty much kill a deal because they don't want to come up by like $2,000. But
lose it over a toaster or something. Yeah.
Right. It's their decision, and you have to respect that decision.
No, for sure. And I think that's going back to, a lot of people are like, what is the purpose of a realtor? That's one of the main things, because we are the go-between. You know how many deals I would have lost? I'm sure you know the same thing. How many deals would we have lost if you relayed the exact same message that the seller said to say to the buyer?
Yeah.
I've had a client say to me, tell the buyer to go fuck himself. I'm not saying that.
No. But that's also one of the reasons why you need real estate agents.
All right.
Welcome back
Welcome back.
to another episode of Do you have a name?
The Real Deal.
The Real Deal,
Yeah.
right.
It was a fast name, but
I like it.
talk about it. Well, this is the Real Deal, right? So
It's all about transacting in real estate.
there you go. The ups and downs. We had a little technical glitch, but I think it's solved. What were we talking about?
I have no idea. I think where we left off, we were talking about just how the market has shifted in the last few years, few weeks, few days.
Yes. Yeah.
We were discussing how, buyers are just sitting on the sidelines. We've seen mortgage rates come down, but
Nothing really is.
the action hasn't come back. But you know what, I was thinking about that actually, and we were talking about how last year the spring market was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember being out with my client, and we had a pretty serious. I mean, the winter wasn't as bad last year. I think this year it was just incredibly long.
Yes.
You know.
We had a few big snow dumps.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I live here in the city. I'm in Mississauga, so certainly our winter conditions were nothing comparable to what people saw out in Barrie and Muskoka.
Right.
It's rather treacherous conditions.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point was I remember being out with my buyers last year during, you know, the February, March months when it was still cold, and there was just a lot more. I mean, I was running into other agents. We were overlapping showings. There was multiple offers happening. It wasn't definitely the hot market that we saw in previous years, but there was a little bit more excitement.
Last year.
Last year.
Yeah, I think so. There was still uncertainty, but it wasn't like it is now.
And the rates were higher, right?
Yeah,
The interest rates were higher. But again, speaking to how the sort of external and even psychological processes will affect the way people transact and approach real estate.
No, I agree. Where do you think things are going to go given the stat? We had just gone over the stats.
Yep.
Things are trending a little
Yep.
a little down. Where do you think? What do you personally think is going to happen this year?
I honestly don't know, and I'm not giving that kind of advice out. And I think if any agents are giving that kind of advice out, you know,
Talking out of their ass.
Yeah, a little bit, because we don't know. Like the trade war. Look at the last few weeks. Even it's like.
Yeah.
We're getting tariffs. We're not getting tariffs. We're getting tariffs on auto, on like cars and stuff. Oh, we're not.
Yeah.
So I think just based on that, it's hard to predict. But I think this year in general is going to be hard for a lot of people.
I think so.
And I approached that mentality. You know, once we started to see some of this bad news that was coming out, I kind of approached my business plan in that way as well. Is okay, I first of all, I've got to double down on what I'm doing to generate leads, because it's slower. A lot of my business does come, we were talking about, you know, repeat and referral clients. That's really for me anyway, it's what I want my business to be.
You want some of the best ways, yeah.
Yeah, having those forever clients that want to transact with only you, and having those forever clients that refer you as well. It's a great way. It's a great business to have. But you know, you certainly feel it more, I think, when the industry gets slower and your database isn't moving. It definitely affects your business, right?
No, absolutely. And I think I've been trying to pivot or transition my marketing towards trying to target people that actually want to sell.
Absolutely.
That not even want to, they need to sell, or they need to buy. You know, we have a lot of people that are renewing their mortgages.
Yep.
At higher rates. I was just talking to, actually I was at an engagement party yesterday, I was talking to one of the guests, and yeah, same thing, they locked in like a 1.89%, and now it's time to renew. So, you know, luckily they didn't pay that much for the house. It's out east. But still a mortgage, still considerable amount of money.
Yeah.
But imagine applying that now to like $1.5 million.
Absolutely.
So I think I've been focusing, you probably are as well, on people that actually want to sell. We've been talking about, it's sad to say, but a lot of, if you're getting a divorce, call me. If you're getting, you know, if you need to move.
If you're having a new baby, your family's growing. Yeah. There's. So I mean, I think we need to really clarify that the market is slower, but people still have to buy and sell real estate for exactly the reasons that you mentioned, right? You know, unfortunately, people get divorced. People downsize.
I had a lady that she's moving out of the country, so needs to sell.
People move. I think we're definitely going to see a rise, and I think there's been a rise in immigration out of the province of Ontario.
Yeah, immigrating. Yeah, it's true.
Right?
Well,
You know, for the longest time, the supply was limited.
Yes.
We had so many people coming into Ontario, and the prices went up because there wasn't enough supply to meet the demand.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing kind of a reverse trend in a lot of markets, right?
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of supply. I think at the end of the day, though, because I'm sure you check MLS, as do I, almost daily. Or once a week, I'll check what's sold recently in my areas. And to your point, at the end of the day, yeah, it's a tough condition right now, but things are still selling.
Yeah.
There's tons of new listings, but every day there are still, quite a few solds. Things are selling every day. People are buying every day, so there's business to be had.
Yep.
So there is a market still. It's contracted a bit. Let's be real.
Yeah. It's definitely not that hot market that we saw in February, March of 2021. But I think it was a little bit easier maybe to be a real estate agent then as well, because, if you put a property at that time anyway, what did you really need to do to sell the house? You take some nice pictures, you put it on MLS, and then it sells at the end of the day way over asking. Those times are definitely gone. We're still seeing competing offers here and there. Like there's certain properties that I see come to market and they fly off the shelf pretty quickly, but
honestly, the offer date is not dead.
It's not.
In some area, when it's executed property, it's not dead.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But I have seen a lot of failed offers.
Oh, of course.
Seen a lot of failed offers.
What do you think? What do you think? Have you ever analyzed and say, okay, this is why? Why do you think they're failed? Is it the initial starting price? Sometimes I see that like it's worth 1.2, but they're starting at 1199 with an offer date.
Yeah, sometimes it's price, but sometimes, I mean, in a slower market, one thing that I would say is buyers are a little bit turned off by that. I think buyers are more savvy than they've been before, so they know now when they see a property listed for like $799 and the true value is actually $1.2 million. I feel like they're less likely to want to participate in that bidding war.
No, I agree. You have to. It's not just a one and done thing. You have the gap down can't be like it can't be that high of a gap. It also can't be too close. I find the offer date. I don't know about you, but I find it works well with things in and around the million range. Under $1 million and in and around $1 million, like. I think the most I will do nowadays is 999 with an offer date, and maybe we're expecting like 1.2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of doing like 1.199 and then expecting 1.4. Like at that point, just
I agree.
Maybe undervalue it a little bit. If you want 1.5, 1.429 or something, and then hopefully spur some action.
I certainly agree, and I think that the marketing really has to be aggressive.
Yes.
You want this property to be viewed by as many people as possible. So you have to take that into consideration, right? Because people are not just looking on MLS nowadays for properties.
No.
So, where else can you get attention from buyers if you're planning to implement that strategy?
I don't know, but I was going to ask you, but we have a lot of traction on Instagram Reels. We do a lot of listing Reels, even buy Reels, an open house, something like that. But even if you are looking on MLS, because a lot of people, they initially screen the property through there. So front facing, first impressions are everything. This,
absolutely.
Right? Whether it was the property or hiring a realtor, first impressions are everything. If you ruin that first impression, it's over for you. So same thing with the property. So you want to have those professional photos. You want it to be clean. You want it to be staged, which I think people underestimate staging. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
So you want to invite them to come see the property. So we actually find when you do all that, people that actually do end up coming see the property are more interested in the property. They're
Absolutely.
actually more, they're more than just curious. They actually like what they saw. Now they want to see more. And I think that's a really big factor that people don't, kind of account for.
Absolutely. And I mean, don't even get me started on not having professional photos. I think
phone photos.
Anybody that knows me, and again, if it's a rental listing, then you know what? All right, take your cell phone photos. But if you're dealing with like a $2 million listing, and you can't be bothered to even hire an amateur photographer for like $100. I mean, photographers are not crazy expensive.
Our provider's like $150 for basic photos.
Basic photos. And when I see these expensive listings and the photos are very obviously taken with a phone. Mm-hmm. My God. And we were talking about this earlier, like why do you care so much, right? The seller hired who they wanted to hire, probably at a discount, unfortunately.
Oh, I will talk about that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I understand everybody is free to make their own choices how they see fit, but we're coming back again. What is the value of a real estate agent?
Yes.
If you can't even be bothered to hire a photographer and you're planning to collect, what would you say is the average commission now? If a home is priced, average price you said, Matthew, around $1 million?
Yeah, so are we talking about like a 2.5% commission?
Let's say even if you're charging just 1%.
On the listing side.
On the listing side.
Yeah, 10 grand. Well, that's the thing. I think to your point, what I was going to say is a lot of agents, the first thing, their first negotiation is to cut their commission right away. And they don't realize they're handcuffing themselves before the listing even begins, because now you have no budget. Okay, $1 million listing, $10,000 commission. You know, you can spend a couple grand on the listing still if you want.
Absolutely.
But there are some agents that do like a flat fee.
Yep.
You know, I've seen some in some areas like $500. What? Please tell me, what are you doing for $500? You handcuff yourself. Even I see a lot of 1% agents, they don't put the effort in. You know, because we have our base practice starts at 5, but then we move it up to all the way up to 6% because we offer a lot of services and we break it down. Like for 6, we'll paint and do a bunch of other things, but you know, based off what the house needs, right?
Yes, exactly. So you have to start from there, and I know sellers don't really like to hear, well, we've got to declutter, we've got to do this. It would be good for you to paint your property, do a little bit of curb appeal improvement. And I understand that some sellers just don't want to go through that process, but the seller also needs to understand that they might not be getting the maximum value that they can for that property. Paint's not expensive. Obviously, if you're hiring a professional painter, it's going to run you back a little bit.
Yes.
But I'd say painting is something that you can even do yourself.
Yeah, if you so choose to,
Right?
It depends on the homeowner, right? Like if they're hands-on, no problem. I'm not going to pitch you that package. We don't have a cookie cutter plan. It's individual, right? So if you can't even negotiate your commission, that's what I usually say. If you cannot negotiate your commission, how am I going to negotiate the sale of your home? If the first thing I'm willing to do is cut my price, what do you think the first thing I'm going to do when I'm in a negotiation for the sale of your property? I'm gonna capitulate on price for you.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you've been on the other side of a table with an agent that you send over the offer. They kind of make an effort to maybe up the price or improve some of the terms of your buyer's offer, and then they have their seller accept it. There's not really much to it. Great if I'm working on the buyer's side in that situation, but.
No.
Is it a great outcome for the seller?
Well, because no, definitely not, and they probably will never know that it was that case.
Right.
But because they think they got a deal on the commission, but my thing is always, what if I told you we charge a little bit more than some realtors, but we also net you more. So what would you rather have, right? And we only get paid when the property sells. So if you're not happy with the price, we don't get paid anyways. That's the risk we take, right? It's the business. Right. Which is also why we qualify and make sure you're actually serious about selling this market, but that's a conversation for a different day. But to your point, you need to
invest.
Exactly, you need to invest and really care about your listing, because I've never really met a 1% agent that didn't care about volume, because at 1% you need volume.
That's right.
So you're just trying to get them out the door. That's it. One and done. Okay, leave $10,000 on the table here, $5,000 here, because I'm going to get to the next listing. Yeah.
Next.
And I get it. I would do the same. I would like to think I wouldn't, but if I have bills to pay and a family to feed, I would probably be doing the same thing.
Right, and that comes back to, again, how you want your business to look. I want my business to be based on repeat and referral clients, not being able to say, oh, you know what, I sold 15 houses this month. But what was the quality of the transaction for those people?
No, true. Well, I think I was telling you before we started the podcast, a gentleman reached out to us. He had bought a condo out west in Calgary, I believe, and the agents were local. I guess they had some kind of connection, referral fee. I don't know what the situation was, but anyways, the agents were local, and he told me they were so responsive and so gung-ho, and they would contact him all the time before he signed the deal. As soon as the money was transferred, they got paid the commission, and now he ran into this trouble. Into the wind. So, that's what you get with an agent that doesn't care.
Sure.
and that's why we like that client for life mentality. There's a stark contrast between the two.
Yeah, exactly. And, I always tell my clients, I'm going to help you facilitate this transaction, but I want you to know that you can also reach out to me at any point after. You bought your house 2 years later, I'm going to keep in touch with you, but you know what, maybe you're looking for somebody to fix your appliances. I want my clients to contact me first and see if I can help them solve that problem.
Client for life. Client for life. I like
Love it.
Right?
Love it. My new slogan.
Makes it.
Let me make you a client for life.
What do you think about we talked about this before, but what do you think about, the real estate expectation versus reality? There's a lot of shows like Selling Sunset. I'm sure there's other ones. I don't really follow them, but Selling Sunset is one I've heard about, where it's all glitz and glam and, $10 million listings, and they're having, champagne parties, and
they're walking around with the high heels making holes in the hardwood floors. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and the commissions just they're rolling around in the dough, and it's not like that.
Here's what I'll tell you. A friend of mine, because I'm into reality TV. I think we all love to watch a little bit of trash television.
Right.
But I could not bring myself to watch those. I mean, I love Property Brothers and like some of the renovation shows. I do enjoy
those
watching
are more realistic,
that.
though, I imagine.
But in terms of Selling Sunset, I mean, I had a lot of friends that would ask me, they're like, oh, have you seen the latest season? I'm like, I couldn't get through the first 5 minutes of the first episode because exactly what you were describing, like it's just not like that. And we were talking about that earlier as well, is there is a misconception that people think this job is a lot easier than it is because of some of the reality shows, because of the way real estate is presented on social media. And I think we need to remember, as real estate agents, we're not celebrities.
No.
We are servants. We are supposed to help our clients transact in real estate. It's not supposed to all be about our ego. Like, I don't know if I want to go down this path, but I'm going to go anyway, and we can edit it out if we need to later.
Let's walk down the path, no problem.
I cannot stand, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I cannot stand the listing videos where it starts off with the agent pulling into the listing in their snazzy car.
In their Maserati.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, unless you're showcasing like a really long, luxurious driveway to this property, what is the point of the guy recording you drive 5 meters into it's such an ego thing. And I think that the public now has started to respond to that as well, where it's just, why?
Yeah, I don't know. It's that need to. I think social media is a big factor. It's that need to just project, like, look at me, look what I'm doing,
right?
Look at my life,
absolutely.
And they'll never show the other side. Maybe that is their car. Maybe that was maybe they do make millions of dollars in real estate, but they don't tell you about the fight they got into with their spouse or something.
How many times they've declared bankruptcy?
Right. They just never paint that other side of the picture. Right. I don't know. I'm sure I'm guilty of it too. I don't post.
I'm sure I've done it myself as well on social media, where you're just a little bit too much in somebody's face. Sure.
Honestly, I use my social media now for just kind of business. I try not to post personal stuff on there anymore, but that's just my personal choice. But it's true. I hate to say it, but there are a lot of agents in this that their egos are very inflated. Very inflated. I've come across some realtors that just, even in my own brokerage sometimes, just,
settle down.
Yeah.
You just want to tell them to settle down.
They're just entitled, and, they think they're the best, their shit doesn't stink, and, I guess you get that in any industry.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely Selling Sunset is not what this is about. Maybe if you go, I don't know, was it in LA? Was it in LA?
I don't even know.
I don't know, maybe you want to go to LA or Miami, maybe it's like that there, but it's not like that here. It's definitely a lot of grunt work, a lot of sweat equity, a lot of tears.
I can. Well, I don't know that I can count because of how many times, for example, I've locked myself in like a condo stairwell, or I've gotten lost in the underground parking garage. And when I'm showing condos, there is no way in hell that I'm going to be wearing high heels to those showings. And it's again, I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, a lot of families. doesn't work for a lot of my clients for me to show up with all of that glitz and glam, and it just doesn't fit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not even necessary, right? Like, what does that have to do with how you're going to help them, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you can't look like a slob.
No,
but-
you've definitely,
Yeah.
you got to step it up, right?
Yes.
Because you are a professional, so I'm not saying that you should show up in sweatpants.
No.
Although I see agents doing that more often. And
I've seen it.
I don't know. Yeah, you got to be comfortable. I'm not going to judge someone for that, but yes.
Probably won't catch me doing that, but hey, I'm not in a suit and tie every day like today. I'm not, but you dress a little bit.
I agree. When I'm, if I'm going to be spending the day at home prospecting or looking after admin stuff, of course I'm going to be in my sweats. Of course I'm going to be in my sweats.
Yeah, that's not front facing, right? No, absolutely.
No, I'm in my basement. Lights turned down low. Nobody needs to see that. Nobody needs to see that.
So actually, we just had Jordan was running, what is it, like a new agent boot camp type thing. So I was just wondering, you're involved with new agents as well. You help mold them in a way. Do you have any advice for new agents?
Oh boy, I have so much advice. Well, where do I begin? My first point of advice is actually, and this is something that I always reflect on how I first got started into real estate. And one thing that I never did was ask for help.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and you know what it was? I didn't want to seem like I didn't know what I was talking about. But you can read into as much real estate as you want. Experience is definitely an important teacher.
Yes.
So I was always very afraid to ask for that help because I was thinking like, God, I don't want to seem like an idiot asking this question that may or may not be easy to answer. So I was always reluctant to reach out for that help, but I think it matters as well the brokerage that you sign with. So
yes,
the first brokerage I entered into, it just wasn't the right fit for me,
okay.
And I didn't feel comfortable asking those questions. So that's something I would suggest is when you're first getting started, the brokerage that you join with is very important, and the people you are around is very important. Like I came to Remax West, this is my third year now with the brokerage, but I joined around the time that I was kind of coming out of my maternity leave and my mom bubble.
Okay.
And being here was an incredible boost to my business just because I was around people that were top producing, that were transacting a lot, and that were open to sharing ideas as well. So, we have our Monday brainstorm. You might show up to brainstorm, you might chat with your agents, you might get nothing out of it, or you might learn like a big piece of information that you log into your mind for later, and it's extremely helpful. So we also here at Remax West have some really, really incredible agents that are not only experienced, they've been doing it for a lot of years, but they're open to sharing, some of their successes and what doesn't work for them. So that's what I would say is when you're getting started, don't be afraid to ask for help, but also make sure that you're going to a place where you won't be shy to ask for that help.
That's true.
What would be your advice for a new salesperson?
My advice. I have a few things. I think one thing I would say is try everything.
Yep.
Try everything, because when I joined, you get a lot of advice from people, a lot of do's, don'ts.
Yep.
And take that, store it in the back of your head, but try it anyways. I think maybe it's just me, but I like to try things for myself first. Because you never know, it might have not worked for that person, but it might very well work for you. So I would say try everything. Try all the free resources first. There's an inclination to just pay for leads or,
Even pay for training, find training that's free.
Yeah, exactly. We offer a lot of free training here. Door knocking is free. Social media is free.
Yep.
There's Facebook Marketplace.
There's so many activities that you can do now that, agents back in the 80s, 90s, we really have to think about that. They did not have the internet.
Nothing.
So they had to go out and find clients. Meanwhile, you could literally be in your sweats, record some quality content on social media and see what sticks.
Yeah, no, that's true.
See what sticks, because there's so many avenues now to advertise yourself for free, to do free training. I mean, think about it. You can do training through your brokerage, you can do training through your board. Like, there's just so much training out there.
Yeah.
And especially when you're starting out your business, you probably have a little bit more time because you don't have as much business. So do a little bit of training, right?
Doesn't hurt, no, for sure.
I mean, you probably still actively do a lot of training on a regular basis.
No, I
would you
do.
say?
I was doing the Rob Vivian training for a while. I think I'm gonna transition to something else just because I think I've learned everything I can. Now I want to just try some other things, some more like niche things.
Yeah.
But that was great. Honestly, the brokerage gives access to Rob Vivian when you join. Fantastic resource.
I loved Rob Vivian as well. I still do.
Yeah.
I really like the way he approaches coaching, because there's other coaching programs that I've been part of where there's a lot of mindset matters, and don't get me wrong, mindset matters in this industry, but if you don't actually have a plan of action,
Yes.
then you can say all the affirmations in the mirror in the morning as you want. If you don't have an actual plan of attack, then it's not going to get you very far. So that's what I really liked about Rob Vivian, is he had a clear cut approach. Here's what you do this, and reap the benefits.
No, I agree. And I would say don't be afraid of leases.
No, definitely.
I think we both started our career doing a lot of leases. I'm not sure about you, but I've had some leases turn into buy and sell deals.
Yep.
And they were almost always from free sources, like online. Like I would post property for lease, they'd respond to it, and like, hey, I see you have a lot of stuff for lease. Do you have anything to buy? And that turned into a first time home buyer client. Like, and it was
a
free.
lead is a lead.
A lead is a lead, and I've spent I've had more success with the freaking free stuff than I have with the paid stuff, which is annoying because you're paying, and these leads are not cheap, but you get the free stuff. So a new agent, take advantage of the free stuff, man.
Absolutely, and I hear that very often. People ask me like, do you buy internet leads? And it's not something I've ever done, because I've heard such negative experiences where agents are spending just an insane amount of money, and a lot of these internet leads, if they're being given to you, they're also being dispersed to other people that are buying these leads. So
sure,
it's the conversion isn't amazing. So I definitely think that there's better ways, especially when you're starting out. There's better ways to find business that are going to cost you less and hopefully
for sure
convert a little bit better.
Yeah, like I'll give credit where it's due. Like I haven't gotten a deal off of this new software we're using, new lead gen, but we did just do 2 listing appointments directly from it.
Nice.
So there is like
there's leads to be had for sure.
Yeah. But to your point, who knows, right? Like, are they giving this lead to someone else? Even if they're not giving the lead to someone else, who's to say Billy Bob is not going on your website for the lead and then goes on your website, or Jordan's website, Michelle's website, and then you have 4 lead profiles, and then it just matters on the speed to lead, the agent, how they nurture them, right?
Absolutely. And I'm not talking about like realtor.ca leads, because if you have a listing and somebody's contacting you for that,
that's great.
I think there's a better opportunity to convert and generate business from that. But you've got to have those listings in order to have access to those leads. And then, what? Overall, having a listing is a amazing source of business if you use it properly.
Listings are king. Yeah, that's
right?
What they say. Yeah, I mean, we have an election coming up.
Yeah.
Do you have who do you think, I won't get into candidates, individual candidates, but which party do you think is best for us realtors in the real estate environment, and the housing crisis?
You know what, I don't want to say, because I think I don't want it to seem biased. I definitely don't want to tell anyone who to vote for either.
No.
But I think change is needed. Something needs to change.
Yes.
So that would be my comment there, and I'll just leave it at that. What about you?
I don't mind saying it. So I think we do need the change. I think, me personally, I think it would be, what is it? The definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Right.
So, we've had, with all due respect to the Liberals, we've had 10 years of your governance, and certain issues have not been addressed, and if they have, they've been addressed poorly.
Yep.
And I think you're making us out to all be fools if you think we're gonna fall for, you're putting lipstick on a peg. You've changed your figurehead, but the core is still the same. So I think we need change. Now that's not to say I'm wary about the conservatives too. I don't know.
Yep.
It's very easy to make promises. Very easy to say
Absolutely.
you're going to make changes, but then when you're actually in office, are you going to make the change? That's yet to be seen. But I think I just don't know how you can reward a party that's been in power for 10 years with another 4 years. That's where I come from.
Yeah. And we were talking about real estate agents and how they shouldn't be thinking that they're celebrities. Politicians have started to fall into that same problem.
Yes.
You are supposed to be a public servant. You are supposed to be representing the nation. You're not supposed to be this, jet setter touring countries, taking these overpriced vacations. That's not what the intent of government was supposed to be.
No. And we've kind of lost the ability to hold our leaders accountable.
Yep.
Because even if we do vote out the Liberals federally this election, there's nothing stopping the Conservatives from taking power and not making any change, right?
Absolutely.
It just seems to be the same revolving door, right? So if any of you candidates are listening, please do better, because this country needs and deserves better. So.
But if you think about it in general, any other job where you don't do the job properly, or there's some sort of scandal associated, you do something wrong, okay, you get a warning, you do something wrong again, you get fired.
Yeah, there's the hard reality, it hits you, yeah. Where in politics doesn't seem like that. You can be a career politician and make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but
sure, but
at some point
you've got to hold yourself accountable for those mistakes, and that's kind of where I saw lack in the last few years. Is there was no accountability.
No, and I don't even know if that'll be the case with the Conservatives, but I think we have to at least let them try.
Yeah.
Give them the rope to hang themselves, so to speak, if they wish to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally am not falling for, Liberal. They switched figureheads. They pushed out Trudeau, and now, Mr. Carney's in there. Great, but I think it's too little, too late for me personally.
I understand, and that's fair.
But
fair.
I think it's important, because I've had a lot of debates with friends and stuff. That sometimes it gets heated and gets very tribal, and it's like, listen.
We're allowed to have differences in opinion. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think people forget that we all need to have this homogenous view, but it's okay to have opposing opinions.
And to your point, it's alarming to me sometimes the amount of how often, I'll be expressing my point of view, and then it seems, or my opinion, and then I'm getting like a lashback because I don't subscribe to your view. I try my best to respect everyone's view.
Absolutely.
I don't think I have all the answers. I don't think you do either.
No, and I know I don't.
Right, exactly. But through the exchange of ideas, maybe we disagree on something, but I might learn something from you, you might learn something from me, or maybe I might learn, Kasia was right completely, I need to change my view on this. I try to be open to that, whereas I find a lot of people are just closed off. This is my tribe, and this is
no matter what happens, I'm not abandoning this tribe.
I'm gonna toe this line till
no
I
matter
die.
what.
Yeah,
I think that's problematic, right? I don't usually, actually, I don't ever get involved with, arguments on the internet and in comments or on social media. But there was something. Are you familiar with Nextdoor? It's like it's like a neighborhood sort of Facebook where you kind of your communities, you can connect with your neighbors and whatnot.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, there was an election related something was posted on there, and I was just casually reading through the comments, and I saw something that I felt that I needed to comment on, and I had put in there some statistics. Right out of Stats Canada. So these weren't statistics that I made up. I sourced this from Stats Canada. I Googled it first, obviously, but it took me right to the Stats Canada website. Copied and pasted it into the thread. And, somebody didn't quite agree with what I was sharing, despite the fact that this was factual information, right? It wasn't my opinion, it was facts. Right. And, I got called something derogatory, which I wasn't even the nationality that I was being termed, and not long after that my comments were deleted. So I think that we need to, like you said, it's okay to have differences in opinion, but you gotta let other people also share information,
of course,
right? So that's one of the problems of social media, unfortunately, is I think that it's amazing in the sense that we do get to share information so quickly and so rapidly, but you can see how people become polarized as well because they jump onto, one train and they're like, this is the only train that I want to ride. And
yeah, no, it's scary in a way because you can almost if you know what their affiliations are, you can almost always guess their opinion on something,
right?
Because it's just always that side.
And I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't vote in the last election, but
you're voting in this election?
I will, definitely voting in this election, but the last time we had an election, I didn't align with any of the views, right? So it just didn't seem right. I mean, I could go cast a vote for somebody else to the opposing party just so that the party that might win is not going to get my vote, but that's not.
So I always forget this. My buddy Andrew did this once. So you can go to on election day. You can go. I think you give like a vote in protest where it's you show up, you sign up, and they register that you like rescind your vote or something like that. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so it still count. I forget the exact term, but if you can look it up. So they will count you as showing up. So you're making a statement in a way.
Yeah.
But that it's like a vote in protest, so to speak.
Interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I didn't know about it either.
Something to look into. Yeah.
Yeah, because at least because then people say, oh well, if you don't vote, then you can't
complain.
have an opinion, which is a fair point. But if you did something like that, then
Well, I mean, I know, but I stand by my perspective that if I just don't see my beliefs and thoughts and expectations of what Canada should be like reflected in any of these parties, then where are you going to cast your vote, right?
No, I get it. And to your point, I think that's a critique on our system too, because it doesn't really matter what the individual candidate stands for. They're going to toe the party line no matter what. So that's why I don't even care about what my local candidate wants to do. I just look at the party platform because that's what they're going to promote.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a lot of people out there that they're so tied to the person that is in charge of their riding that it doesn't matter what party they would even be with. It's just that they like that one person.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Like
and that's not
ride or die.
Yeah, that's not good either. That's not good either.
No, I think we need to push like a free thinking society that's open to different opinions and open to changing their views on things.
Sure.
And that's how we all grow.
You know what? The other thing is that the world is changing so fast. I mean, even our real estate industry. We were talking about doing training. I'm still very regularly learning new things in this industry. I'm sure you are too.
We all are, yeah.
Yeah, and you need to be because things change so quickly, even with AI is becoming such a big component, not just in our industry, but across the board. So I think that's going to change the world a lot.
Yes.
And so we've also got to stay on top of that because I'm sure you've heard the argument that AI is going to replace real estate agents. They're not going to be here eventually.
Good luck, ChatGPT, dealing with some crazy clients. Good luck. But
it's
it's replacing a lot of it does a lot of back end work, even for lawyers and stuff, articling. Well, not articling, but they have to do deep research. Anything labor intensive like that, it's cutting down the times. No, it's affecting our industry too. I've used it. I know some colleagues that have used it in their business. I agree with you. We should take advantage of what we can.
I think, but AI for me anyway, as a real estate agent, AI is a tool, but I don't think you should be relying solely on it to be a real estate agent.
Oh,
right?
100%. You don't want it to be a crutch. You want it to be a tool, like you said, to help you. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I agree.
But I've seen, sometimes I do worry about how much reliance is being placed on AI, and I not to give away my age here, but I grew up before the internet, so a lot of people, you can't really. My son's going to grow up; he's never going to know what a world without internet is like.
Without a device in his hand,
and I got to see that, and so you think about how the world has changed and how that change now is so much more rapid. With the evolution of technology, it's like where are we going to be in 10 years from now?
Oh God, I don't know.
Do you ever think about that? Doesn't it just give you so much anxiety?
Yeah, I try not to think about it. But I think it might be unrecognizable. It's true. Yeah, if we don't destroy ourselves first.
Yeah, I know, right? Could happen.
Could happen. But anyways, that's why you should go vote. Go vote. Try and shape our future.
Definitely. I cannot stress enough. Again, I'm not telling you who to vote for.
No.
but I think young people are going to play a huge role in this
Yes.
election, and I've been openly talking about that for a while. But you know, young people, I know that you're open to sharing your perspectives on social media, but don't forget to actually go and cast your vote.
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't matter until the vote's casted. Absolutely. No matter who you vote for whoever you want to.
Yes.
But exercise that right and
Exactly.
exercise it well. So.
Yeah, because like you said, you know, you can't really complain if you didn't go out and try to.
Yeah. I mean, it's the democratic system. It's definitely not perfect, but it's the best system we've known to man so far. So, you know, we have to participate in it. And if we don't like something, we need to try and work within that system to change it. So, which is not always easy. That's actually, you asked me during the break why I decided to start a podcast. That was actually one of the reasons why, you know, also to grow my, you know, my base and to try and attract, you know, clients so they get to see who I am.
Yeah.
And, but also to, you know, help try and change things hopefully in a small way. We're a small town still, but.
And you know what? You don't realize the importance of that because we've got access to more information than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't always tell if that information is correct, genuine, accurate.
Yes.
I know sometimes, you know, you see a video on TikTok or something, and the person on the other side maybe is in a podcast role, and you're like, wow, yes, I know, that's amazing. That's definitely the correct information, and I'm gonna run with that. You've got to make sure that the information that you're getting is accurate and factual.
That is a very good point.
Right? Misinformation is, I think, a bigger problem than it's ever been before.
What you said about social media, like, you know, and your son growing up with technology, whereas we didn't, but you're surrounded by information. Now the harder part, before it was access information, now it's trying to funnel what is true, deciphering what is true, what is not. Like you said, it's true. It's very true.
and you know, I'm sure you've run into that sometimes with clients as well, because most of the general public has access to sold data.
Yes.
For example, right? They know what their neighbors sold their house for. They're already watching that
Don't get me started on House Sigma. I have a huge beef with this realm app, and
I think we've all got issue with
when a client can search up information faster than I can, we have a problem. And we're paying dues.
It's not always a bad thing.
No, it's good, but we should have on par, if not better, systems too, right?
Absolutely,
That's my thing.
absolutely. The proprietary information that we pay for as real estate agents should stay as such.
Yes.
But you know, it goes both ways, right? Because sometimes you've got clients that are super educated and they've got a lot of information about what's happening in the market, what's even happening in their neighborhood, but they've got to make sure that they're using that information correctly, because I'm sure you've had situations where I'm still finding that sellers sometimes are talking about how their neighbor sold their house for X amount during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes, I know.
Those years, like that market passed a long time ago. So still relying on that information. It's like, oh, well, my neighbor sold for $1.4 million in 2021. Why can't I sell for 1.5? It's a difficult conversation to have, because you don't want to tell that person that they're wrong in what they're thinking,